Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly. If you are new around here, if you've never seen my face before, then hi, my name is Molly and I post true crime videos every single week, so if you think that's something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and also switch on your little notification bell so that YouTube will notify you every single time I upload. But anyway, this week we are going to be talking about the case of 31-year-old Melissa Platt, and Melissa's sister Michelle actually reached out to me a little while ago and asked me to talk about her sister's case, and I was more than happy to, because I think Melissa's story is a very important one to talk about, and also her family are still to this day working so hard to try and get justice for her. I do just want to give a quick pre-warning before getting into today's case, because it does involve domestic violence, which I know is a difficult subject for a lot of people to hear about. I will be leaving some domestic abuse helplines linked in the description box in case anyone needs them. And having said all of that, let's just get into the case of Melissa Platt. So today's case took place in October of 2008 in a small town called Pink Hill, which is in Lenore County in North Carolina in the US. But Melissa's story begins on the 3rd of February 1977, which is the day that she was born. Her parents were called Mike and Marion, and Melissa was one of 4 siblings. As I said, she had a sister called Michelle, and she also had another sister named Maria and a brother named Michael. And Michelle was kind enough to tell me a little bit more about her sister and her personality. So I'm going to read to you what Michelle wrote. She said, quote, "Melissa had a great sense of humour and she was just silly. She could always make me laugh. She was very aware that she couldn't sing, but that would never stop her from singing her heart out, and we would make videos of us both singing. One video of her, she sang Whitney Houston's version of I Will Always Love You, and we played it at her funeral. I smiled and cried when that played. She loved kids and always wanted to be a mum, and she did eventually have 2 daughters named Brianna and Chastity. And she was so proud of her first job at McDonald's, where she hosted birthday parties for kids. She absolutely loved that job and took pride in her work. Melissa was a natural beauty and she had a huge crush on Jordan Knight from New Kids on the Block. We would stay up past our bedtimes and watch scary movies and then have nightmares, but then we would just turn around and do the same thing again. She was a blast to be around, and I miss my sister every day. A piece of my heart was ripped out and will never be healed. We had such a good bond. 2 peas in a pod, we'd be called. She was older than me and was very protective. She would give you the shirt off her back if she knew it would help you. That's how big of a heart she had." End quote. Now, at the time of Melissa's death in 2008, she was dating a man named Joey Tyndall, who was 49 years old, and they had been together for a couple of years. But Joey was not a good guy, and he was very, very abusive towards Melissa and his partners before her. He had 2 sons with a previous wife, and her name was Kathy Adam, and their sons would regularly witness their father being violent towards their mother. He would just beat Kathy constantly and leave her with black eyes and bruises and other horrific injuries. And like a lot of other domestic abuse victims, Kathy was always too scared to tell anyone or confront Joey, and she was also too scared to go to the hospital, even though some of her injuries needed medical attention. Joey was also mentally abusive towards his sons, and according to his sons, he would often pull guns on them and threaten them. Eventually this marriage ended and he and Kathy got a divorce in 2001, and not long after, Joey went on to get married again, this time to a woman named Jamie Duff. And he was just as abusive towards her too. He threatened her with a gun, he would grab her by the hair and throw objects at her, and she actually did go to the hospital a few times, I believe, because of the injuries she sustained. And it got to the point where Jamie had to file for and was granted a domestic violence protective order against Joey in October of 2002, and ultimately the two divorced in 2004. And then 2 years later, in 2006, construction worker Joey met Melissa Platt at an auto parts store in Jacksonville, which is where she worked at the time. As I said, he was also horrendously abusive towards Melissa as well, both mentally and physically abusive. He would beat her up often, but he would also just degrade and humiliate her in front of people, including his own sons. This one time he pointed his fingers at her as if it were a gun, and he pretended to shoot her, and on one occasion Melissa was actually shot with a gun close to her collarbone, I believe, and she told people that she had just shot herself with this gun. However, the angle at which the bullet hit her body indicates otherwise. Melissa's family believe that her boyfriend Joey actually shot her, and that Melissa was just covering for him, as she did often. The two of them lived together, and if Melissa did something that annoyed Joey, he would just kick her out of their home, and she would have to either sleep in the car, or if the car was locked, she would have to sleep on the ground outside in the cold because he refused to let her back in. He just treated her like she wasn't even a human being, and Melissa would often leave Joey because of his violence, but every single time she would just get back with him, which sadly, again, is something that we see a lot in domestic abuse cases. Joey would treat Melissa like dirt, and so she would leave him, but then he would say sorry and grovel and promise to change and never do it again. And she would believe him and agree to give the relationship another go. But of course, these were empty promises. Joey never did change, and he would carry on abusing Melissa. It was just this endless cycle of abuse, split up, grovel, get back together, abuse, split up, grovel, get back together. Their relationship was very toxic. And as I'm sure you can imagine, Melissa struggled a lot with depression because of Joey's behaviour, and she would turn to alcohol to cope with everything that she was going through. In fact, her and Joey's whole relationship was very alcohol based. He also drank a lot, and he introduced Melissa to hard liquor when normally her preferred drink of choice was just beer. Melissa soon became very dependent on alcohol. She had an alcohol addiction, and she did try to sort this out. She went to rehabilitation centres because she wanted some help. She didn't want to live a life fueled by alcohol, but Joey didn't care. In fact, he said that he would kick her out of their home if she continued going to rehab. Melissa's family were just so worried about her, and it was really difficult for them because they didn't actually live close to her at all. They lived in Texas, so they were miles and miles away from Melissa, who lived with her abusive boyfriend in North Carolina. And in October of 2008, their concerns only grew when they realised that they hadn't heard from Melissa in a while. On the 8th of October, Melissa's mother, Marion, decided to contact Melissa's probation officer, John Murray. He had been assigned to supervise Melissa after she was convicted for writing a few worthless checks in 2005. Anyway, Marion rang John, and she asked him if he could please just check that Melissa was okay, since she hadn't been in contact with her family for quite a while and they were worried. Marion had spoken to Melissa's boyfriend Joey on the phone a couple of times, but each time she asked to speak to her daughter, Joey would just come up with random excuses and say that Melissa was unable to come to the phone at that moment. So Marion would keep calling and calling, but soon the calls just started going straight to the answering machine. No one was answering the phone, so she started to think that something must be wrong, which is why she contacted the probation officer and asked him to conduct a welfare check. So John Murray went to Melissa and Joey's home, which was a trailer at 5303 Rex Howard Road in Pink Hill. However, when he knocked on their door, no one answered. But John didn't want to just leave. He was concerned that maybe Melissa was home, but she just couldn't get to the door because she had pancreatitis and she sometimes had trouble walking around. So he decided to contact the Lenore County Sheriff's Department to see if they could get inside the trailer. A police officer soon arrived at the scene and he immediately made contact with the owner of the trailer, Melissa's boyfriend, Joey Tyndall. He spoke to Joey on the phone and he explained the situation, that they were concerned about Melissa Platt, and Joey gave the police permission to enter his trailer through the back door to check on Melissa. So they did just this. They entered the property through the back door and they soon discovered 31-year-old Melissa Platt lying in bed. She was wrapped up in bed sheets and blankets, although the bottom half of her body was exposed, and Melissa was just lying in her own feces. There was an overwhelming smell of urine and waste matter. It was immediately obvious that Melissa was in a very bad way. She was shaking uncontrollably. She had bruises all over her body and a black left eye. And she told the officers that she was in a lot of pain, that her left arm and mouth were hurting. The officers could detect the smell of alcohol in the room, and they noticed that on the nightstand next to the bed there was a drink with a straw in it, and there was also a water bottle that looked like it had hard liquor inside of it. So it appeared as though Melissa had been drinking this alcohol through a straw. And when they asked Melissa if she had been drinking, she apparently nodded. Obviously, like I said, Melissa had bruises all over her body, and so the officer asked Melissa if anyone had beat her, and she said no. And so he asked how she got these injuries, and in his report the officer stated, quote, "Melissa informed me that she was trying to answer her phone and fell, hitting her head." Soon emergency medical services arrived at the trailer and they began taking over. They were getting everything ready so that Melissa could be taken to the hospital to be treated. And the first responders said that Melissa's condition was the worst they'd ever seen before. By this point, Melissa's boyfriend, Joey Tyndall, had returned home. I believe he may have been at work that day, but he arrived home and immediately the officers asked him about Melissa's injuries and the bruises all over her body. And he said that his girlfriend had an alcohol problem and that she sometimes had trouble with walking around the house and she would often fall over, and he said that he had been finding it difficult to both work and look after her, but that he had been trying his best to care for her. He said that Melissa had been in and out of bed for a while, and that just over a week before all of this, on the 29th of September, he found Melissa in the back seat of his car in the middle of the night after she had fallen off the porch and landed on the concrete, and that this resulted in the side of her face being bruised and injured. He also said that a couple of days after this, on the 3rd of October, he came home from work and found his girlfriend like pinned between the toilet and the bathtub, and the tub was overflowing with water. He claimed that she had defecated on herself and fell in the bathroom while she was cleaning herself up, and that these two falls were how she sustained these injuries. Melissa was eventually lifted onto a stretcher and Joey was told that she would be taken to Lenore Memorial Hospital, and he said that he would stay at home and ring the hospital later on to check up on his girlfriend. However, Melissa was actually soon airlifted to another hospital in Greenville because of how severe her injuries were. Once she got there, pictures of her were taken, and Melissa's sister Michelle actually sent me these pictures. and I will be showing a couple of them in a second. I just want to give you a pre-warning before they come up on screen because they are upsetting to look at, but I think they are very important to share because they show just how bad Melissa's condition was when she arrived at the hospital. So like I said, Melissa was covered head to toe in bruises and abrasions. Some were old bruises, others were more recent, and one of the more recent bruises was on her neck, and these bruises on her neck looked very much like strangulation marks. She had a black eye, she was lethargic, she had some damage to her teeth, she had bruising on her rib cage, upper arms and lower abdomen, and her pubic bone had soft tissue swelling and bruising too. Additionally, her toes appeared to have previously been broken and then healed on their own. Melissa was straight away sent for a CT scan, which revealed that she had a dislocated jaw and there was also bleeding on the brain. She had an intracranial hemorrhage. And just under 10 days after she was discovered, on the 17th of October, she had to have head surgery. Doctors had to drill a hole into her head to relieve swelling. Following this, she developed a staph infection and a strain of meningitis, and she had to have a second tube inserted into the left side of her skull because more fluid filled her brain and they needed to relieve the pressure. The following weeks, Melissa tried so hard to fight for her life, and she was constantly in and out of consciousness. And when she was conscious, Jim Oldenburg, the head of the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office Detective Division, claimed that Melissa told him that she thought she had sustained her injuries in a car accident, and that on another occasion she said she couldn't remember what happened, just that she was clumsy and she fell down a lot. However, on the 31st of October 2008, so a couple of weeks after Melissa was found, whilst Melissa's mother and sister were in the intensive care unit with her, she turned to them both and she told them that her injuries were not the result of an accident and that someone had done this to her. Melissa described to her mother and sister being dragged outside by her neck, her shirt being ripped off, being pushed into the bushes, and being hit in the head with something hard. And when Melissa's mother and sister asked her if the person that attacked her was her boyfriend, Joey Tyndall, they noticed that Melissa's face just grew with fear, like just the mention of his name was enough to terrify her. This confession that Melissa gave about what really happened to her were her last words, the last thing she ever said to her family, because 6 weeks later she passed away after having spent 9 weeks in ICU. Like I said, she tried so hard to fight for her life, but ultimately she was declared brain dead, and at 6:58 p.m. on the 17th of December 2008, she was taken off of life support and she took her last breath with her family members around her. So an investigation was set up to determine exactly what had happened to Melissa Platt. Was this genuinely just an accident? Did she sustain her injuries from falling over like Joey had said? Or did something more sinister happen to her? And did her boyfriend, Joey Tyndall, who had a history of domestic violence, inflict these injuries? Joey was interviewed a couple of times about what had happened, and as I mentioned earlier on, he claimed that he had found Melissa on 2 separate occasions after she had fallen over. The first time was on the 29th of September after she had fallen off the front porch and landed on the concrete floor, which was just a 2-foot drop. And the second time, he said, was the 3rd of October. He said that this time he found her stuck between the bathtub and the toilet after she had fallen over whilst cleaning herself. However, according to Melissa's sister Michelle, the doctors in the hospital said that it's very unlikely that she sustained a lot of her injuries from a fall. She had injuries literally all over her body, suggesting that she was beaten, not that she had just fallen over. During the investigation, Joey Tyndall took police officers to his home and he reenacted the time when he found Melissa in the bathroom. He said that he found her with her head wedged in between the toilet and the bathtub. However, Melissa and Joey lived in a trailer and the bathroom was very small, so Melissa's family failed to see how her head could fit between the toilet and bathtub. It was a very small gap. Also, as I said, Joey claimed that Melissa fell off the front porch onto the concrete floor below, and that was how she got some of her injuries. However, the drop from the porch was about 2 foot. So that's not a very big drop. So it seems unlikely that she could have sustained the injury she had from this. It just doesn't really add up. Although the police seem to think that it did add up, and just 2-3 months after Melissa passed away, Captain Jim Oldenburg placed her case on an inactive status. He said of Joey Tyndall, quote, "Joey cooperated fully with our investigation. He did everything we asked of him. He was never angry or avoided us when we reached out to him, and at no point did he seem deceptive." Oldenburg said that Joey even agreed to take a polygraph test, but in the end he wasn't allowed to take it because he had a heart condition. Although Melissa's mother, Marion, says that she was told by another detective that Joey did actually take a lie detector test and there was some deception. So we don't really know what's true there. We don't know if he did take a lie detector test or he didn't, because it seems that different detectives have said different things. But let's just say for a second that Joey was telling the truth, that this really was what happened to Melissa, that she had just fallen over. That doesn't really explain his actions after her falls. He claimed that her second fall was on the 3rd of October, so about 5 days before she was discovered in her bed by the police and her probation officer. So for at least 5-6 days, he just left her in this state. She urgently needed medical attention, and he would have known that. It was obvious just from looking at her. So why didn't he take her to the hospital? If he genuinely had nothing to do with her injuries and they were just the result of a fall, why wouldn't he get her some help? If he had taken her to the hospital as soon as she fell, then there is a good chance that she could have survived and would still be here today. But he didn't. He left her for days and days, and had Melissa's mother, Marion, not asked her probation officer to check on her daughter, she probably would have died in that trailer, because Joey clearly had no intention of getting her some medical help. Melissa's sister, Michelle, also told me that after her sister was discovered, Joey shaved all of his hair off, which was apparently very unusual for him because he actually loved his hair and he got a lot of compliments about his hair. And he also burned the mattress that Melissa was found on. Melissa's injuries and Joey's actions afterwards do not indicate to me that she just accidentally fell over. Joey apparently gave a couple of different reasons as to why he didn't take Melissa to the hospital or why he didn't call an ambulance. On one occasion, he said that it was because he had called an ambulance to his home many times before, and so they just wouldn't come anymore. They refused to come to his house. I don't think that's really how it works, but... And other times he said that the reason he didn't take Melissa to the hospital himself was because she said that she didn't want to go. She refused any medical help, which I also find very hard to believe because Melissa would have been in a lot of pain. She had a broken jaw, she had a head injury, she had bruises all over her body. I just think it seems very unlikely that she would refuse any medical help when she would have been in that much pain. In January of 2009, Melissa's cause of death was ruled as being the result of a closed head injury consistent with a fall contributed by her struggle with alcoholism. So her death was ruled as being accidental. They did not think that foul play was involved, and her boyfriend Joey Tyndall was never arrested for anything. And as I'm sure you can imagine, Melissa's family were very upset about this ruling. They believe that Joey had a part in the death of Melissa. They believe that Joey beat Melissa on the 3rd of October 2008, as he had done many times before, and that this time it just went a bit too far, and so he decided to pretend that she had just fallen over to cover up what he did. If he wasn't going to be charged with murder, then Melissa's family felt that he should, at the very least, be charged with neglect for not taking Melissa to the hospital. As I previously mentioned, had he done that, had he taken her to the hospital as soon as she sustained those injuries, she could still be alive today. But in August of 2009, Melissa's mother Marion was told by District Attorney Vickery that despite the fact that he personally did believe Joey inflicted the injuries on Melissa, he did not feel that there was enough evidence to take the case to trial. He said, quote, "There is no way we are going to make a criminal burden of proof when a medical examiner is making those kinds of findings. If something were to develop later on, we would pursue the case, but all the evidence suggests that she had an out-of-control drinking problem and would frequently stumble and fall as a result." Melissa's family have even said maybe they are wrong. Maybe Joey didn't do this to Melissa. Maybe her injuries really were from just falling over. But they feel as though Melissa's case was not investigated thoroughly, and that the police just dismissed her death because she was an alcoholic and because she had a history of writing a couple of worthless checks. Melissa's case was closed very quickly. She died in December of 2008, and by February of 2009, the case was placed on an inactive status. That's 3 months, and 3 months does not seem like long enough for a proper, thorough investigation. Her family just want her death to be looked into more, and if her death was not an accident, then they want justice. They have been working tirelessly for 12 years now to get some answers, and they are not giving up until they get some, which is why they have asked myself and other true crime YouTubers to try and raise awareness of Melissa's story. Melissa's sister Michelle is currently trying to raise the funds to hire a private investigator to properly investigate this case. I believe they need to raise around $7,500, so I will leave a link to their GoFundMe page in the description box. I will be donating, and if you are able to donate, even if it's just a small amount, I'm sure it will really mean a lot to them. And if you aren't in a position to be able to donate yourself, then just sharing the GoFundMe on your social media would also help. But yeah, that is it for this case. That is the case of Melissa Platt. I will keep you guys updated on the case. I'm really hopeful that Melissa's family will get the answers they are looking for. Please do check out the GoFundMe page. Like I said, even just sharing it, I'm sure will really help. Before I go, I do just want to say a massive thank you to the members of my Patreon page. Thank you so much for your support, guys. If anyone else wants to become a member of our little Patreon family, then the link is always in the description box. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Molly. Bye guys.